conversation in my own head. Do you mind? I'm practicing here. It sounded a little bit like I was talking to, the leaf blower outside, or somebody doing the dishes next to the meditation room. But it was actually what was going on inside. And it reminded me of this quote from the Avatamsaka Sutra, which is a very long and thoughtful sutra. But Sung-san would highlight these 4 lines. If you wish to thoroughly understand all the Buddhas of past, present, and future, then you should view the nature of the whole universe as being created by mind alone. So that's kind of dense. I'll do it a second time. If you wish to thoroughly understand all the Buddhas, past, present, and future, then you should view the nature of the whole universe as made by mind alone, or being created by mind alone. So it's pretty remarkable. We might be able to notice this every once in a while, that our minds are making our universe. We rarely let it get that expansive. When I first heard this teaching, I made a few mistakes, one really serious one. And I made that mistake for about 20 years. And that has to do with the word mind. And when I was raised as a Catholic, I was raised with your heart is over here in a box, and your body is over here in another box, or cage, if you like. And then your mind is also in a third box, and it's the most privileged box, but it's still a cage. And if I had a problem, I was told to figure it out. I was told to solve it. I was told to use my mind. I was taught not to listen to my heart. It was irrational. I was told not to listen to my body. It was insane. All you were supposed to do was track everything in your mind, and that's where the problem occurred, and that's where the problem was solved. So that's a mistake. And in all of our cases, maybe, I don't know how you were all raised, but most of us are in the West right now, and we're conditioned by a bunch of European thought and a bunch of Western capitalist American society ideas, where we privilege a certain kind of activity that makes a lot of money, or we privilege a certain kind of activity that gets a lot of attention. So that makes this mind very special. And I've noticed in our common everyday parlance, we have expressions like, I'll give you a piece of my mind. Or, do you mind if I do such and such? And someone might say, yes, I mind that. So it's a like-dislike feature. We'll say, what were you thinking, to someone? So the ancient Chinese did not see it this way at all. And that's a leap. And so my first teachers and Master Sung-san, he never saw it this way either, because he was Korean, and Zen had come from China into Korea. It had been there about 800 years. And Confucian society, Korean society, also did not make this distinction. And I didn't discover this until I was reading a book by Thich Nhat Hanh on mindfulness. And now, Brendan, I'll ask you to bring up that picture. I brought a hard copy. This is the character in Chinese that is used to write what we would call the word mindfulness. It's usually translated, this whole thing, as mindfulness. So it's become very popular in our parlance, right, in the last 20 years or so. Well, Thich Nhat Hanh points out this big shape here, bump, bump, that's the Chinese character for now. just now. And then this squiggle with 3 marks underneath it is the Chinese character for heart-mind. Because they didn't make a separation between heart and mind. So in the West, they would translate this as mindfulness. I would translate it as now heart-mind. And when we look backwards, if I look at, say, a soldier who's defending the country patriotically, that soldier's heart is completely enmeshed with that soldier's mind. That's the only way the soldier can do a really good job. And if I look at an artist, a musical artist or a painting artist or a sculptor, any kind of creative person, they're passionately working. So their heart is completely embedded in their mind. And then we get this extraordinary art. Because when we see it, we also respond. So we have an experience with our heart. And we have these expressions like heartfelt and wholeheartedly. But they have not been privileged in the way we think. And they have not been privileged in the way we sort out our confusion. So a lot of times these days, I keep adding heart to the word mind. So, because the Chinese didn't, there was no separation in ancient China. Maybe there is now. I don't have a clue. I'm not in contemporary China now. But this became kind of a significant point. So if we look at that first quote, if we change it, if you wish to thoroughly understand all the Buddhas of the past, present, and future, you should view the nature of the whole universe as being created by heart-mind alone. Well, that really changes how that sounds. And if we look at how we experience impatience, say we really love someone and they're flying across the country and their plane is delayed and we're waiting in the airport. And the clock says, oh, it'll be delayed a half an hour. And we look and, oh, only 5 minutes have gone by. And then, oh, this half hour is bound to, oh, only 5 more minutes. Oh, they've got to be here by now. Oh, it's only been 5 minutes, now 15. So we still haven't gotten through a 30-minute delay. And Zen Master Sun Sam would always make this point. Yeah, remember when you're with your friends and you go out clubbing? You get to the club about 10 p.m., the music's great, maybe you have a beer, maybe bottled water, and the next thing you know, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, and the house lights are coming up. Wow, where did the time go? So in the case of the airport, it's all stretched out because our desire mind, because our worry mind, our concern mind has made this time go very, very, very slow. Then this clubbing mind, with or without accompaniment, has made the time fly by. So that's an easy example to see. But then if we start saying, oh, do I make the sky? And in fact we do. And we make this idea of dog and tree and cat. So we're dicing up all of the world, all of universe, into a bunch of ideas. And we need to own that first. That's the first point. If we want to understand the Buddhas of past, present, and future, they owned that their whole world is made by their mind. So they start to take some responsibility for that. And then they start to notice, so if I think something's true, what's that arising from? If I think something is false, what's that arising from? So a very famous teacher said, if you look at where delusion comes from, you will have a more immediate insight. And in the Heart Sutra, right out of the gate, that's what Avalokiteshvara is doing while practicing deeply. So the translation of her name is the one who looks deeply. And she's looking at everything she's going through. And we come to this practice thinking, oh, our Buddha nature's over here being all peaceful and calm. And then wanting to get laid, wanting to get drunk, wanting to be rich, wanting to be famous, that doesn't have our Buddha nature. That's not true. That's a mistake. Also a mistake that I made for maybe 20 years. These things completely interpenetrate. Our Buddha nature is contained in our entire experience. Without cultivation, we are already complete, is how the poem says it. So what's going on? Because clearly in a desire realm, we're suffering. Where has our Buddha nature gone? Why isn't it helping us out? That's a fair question. And we can look at that. And if you ask yourself that question, you'll get your wisdom. You become your teacher just by bringing up that question. I'm suffering. What is the origin of this suffering? You know, we can reverse engineer enlightenment. We can start with suffering, and we can follow it, and when we get to the root of the suffering, boom, we'll actually have insight into our true nature. We'll have insight into something, and it'll be a part of our mind. And if we keep looking at it closely, we'll see, oh, my mind just made that. So I have this experience because I just created the experience. In our tradition, there's a story about a famous Zen master named Wan Hyo. And he doesn't start out a famous Zen master. He starts out a teenager in the Civil War in Korea. And people are horrible to each other. There's an ongoing civil war. Women and children are being slaughtered in his village and in other villages. And it brings him to a standstill. He cannot understand how human beings can behave so badly towards each other, why they are behaving so badly, and what they are doing. It creates an enormous burden, not unlike the Buddha's burden of seeing suffering and not knowing what to do with it, but a little more dramatic in the midst of this civil war. So he shaves his head, he moves into a temple, he becomes a monk. He takes precepts, he starts living in the temple, studying sutras, the Buddha's speech, right? Heart Sutra, Avatamsaka Sutra, Lotus Sutra. This is in something like 800 of the Common Era. So the Buddha's speech doesn't help him. Nothing is helping lift this weight off of his shoulders and off of his heart. How can human beings behave this way? And for me, this is not unlike watching the news these days. Why would people attack the trans community? They're not hurting anybody. What are teenagers doing in Gaza to survive? What is an Israeli teenager doing to square what's happening with the politicians in his country and who he has breakfast with? It just takes a second for us to look at the world, and we're going to be in Hua-yen's position. What is causing all of this? And what's my relationship to it? Like, what is my function in this regard? And in his case, in this very simple setting, he shaves his head and he moves into a temple to try and figure it out. So he reads these sutras, he studies them, he's practicing, meditating every day, and he's not getting any relief. And his friends notice this. And they say, oh, you should probably visit this Zen master in China. He is supposed to have seen into the great work of life and death. So he sees the world through no life, no death. If you can see it that deeply, you won't be suffering so much. So he and a friend of his start this trek on foot to China. Well, they've got to go through Korea first, where there's this ongoing civil war. And it's not going well. It's hard. It's by foot. And they run out of water. He's parched. They're exhausted. They're hiking. Night falls. They camp. There's no water, parched, falls asleep. About halfway through the night, wakes up, thirsty, and just feels around on the ground, feels a cup of water in this complete darkness, and thinks, oh, this is from heaven or something. Brings it to his mouth, drinks really deeply from this cup of water, like a bowl. So delicious. He can't believe it. It's like, oh, some bodhisattva has put this water here. It wasn't here before, when night fell. He sets it aside, falls deep asleep, continues sleeping completely comfortably. Wakes up at dawn, is sort of putting things together, and notices a piece of a human skull about a foot away from his body, and it's got rainwater in it. And there's larvae and some worms kind of spiraling around in it. And it's a fresh human skull because of the fighting. It's got bits of meat and tissue and hair. He's on all fours and just vomits when he sees this skull with rainwater in it, yeah? And then as he's vomiting, wakes up. His mind opens. He thinks, last night I drank this water and it was refreshing and delicious. I see the water I drank and I can't stop myself from vomiting. His mind made both experiences. Now, it's a fair question right now to ask, why doesn't anyone who has food poisoning get enlightenment? Yeah? He had a deep question. And he saw the suffering in this world, and the question prepared his experience. And he could see clearly, oh, it wasn't that I had bad food the night before that I'm vomiting now, because he slept fine after drinking the water. It wasn't the water that made him sick. It was his mind that made him vomit. He has this deep insight into, oh, my mind is making my entire world. He stops his trip. He doesn't bother going to see the famous Zen master in China. He goes back to his home temple and practices and becomes a teacher. Ends up becoming the national teacher in Korea at this time. Because he lives a life of practice, and he lives a life of looking at, oh, since this world is made by my mind, then I cannot be controlled by my thinking. I cannot be controlled by my feeling. I attain my feeling thinking. I attain my heart-mind. Then I see the function of my heart-mind. So finding the function of our heart-mind, that's a human being's job. And it's unique to each of us. And you are your best teacher. Something like a Dharma talk, that might help. Meditation will always help, more than a Dharma talk. Sincere practice, keeping a question, while driving, living your life, that will also help. We attain this thing we call heart-mind, then we can use it. Earlier I talked about how I was trained to think a certain way. That was because of consistency. So consistency of teaching from my parents and my church led to a habit. And the habit led to a character. So I'm 33, 34, so when I find this teaching and I start practicing, very inconsistently at first, I'd sit a 3-day retreat and then go not practice for 3 or 4 months. Then I'd come back and sit a 3-day retreat. So no consistency. But little by little, some consistency appeared. And that consistency began to change the old consistency. And a new habit developed, a habit of meditation. And meditation is returning to zero. It's letting go of any idea, any kind of feeling, any kind of impulse. Because for 30 minutes on the cushion, we're completely free. We're free because we're being still. We're not following the impulse. We're not following the idea. We're not that those things are bad. Ambition, strategy, careers, raising children, getting laid, having fun. It's not that those things are inherently bad. But why do we do them? And how do we do them is extraordinarily important. So if we're not clear, then we don't know why we're doing them, we don't know how we're doing them, and we don't know what we're doing. But if we become clear, then, oh, this is why I'm doing this. And then these things help this world. So if we look at our lives, we'll see, oh yeah, there was this consistency, and that led to habit, and that led to character. So now we go to zero, and we practice, and we become free of the old stuff, and it's possible to transform our thinking and our feeling into wisdom and insight. Then we can use it to help ourselves first, initially. Then we help people we love or people we hate. And then we help people that we're not so close to. And it gets larger and larger like that. The last quick point I want to make is traditionally, retreats in this tradition are 90 days. That's one of the lengths. 3 days, 7 days, 21 days, 90 days, and 100 days. Boot camp in most contemporary cultures is 90 days, 3 months. And the reason that is, in both cases, a kyolche or boot camp, is that in 90 days, you can rewire these habits and consistencies into something new. And my son went through boot camp, and he came out a changed person in very valuable ways, actually. He didn't lose his identity, he didn't lose his poetry, but he lost a lot of bad habits. And he gained a lot of new habits. And he actually gained an enormous amount of insight into his temperament while being in boot camp for 3 months. So I became remarkably proud of him. I had tried to talk him out of it 3 times, and I succeeded, and he delayed joining. Then he joined and wrote me a letter, said, I didn't tell you I was joining because I knew if I did, you would talk me out of it again. So we want to look at this kind of 3-month time period and be really gentle with ourselves. If we have some insight, oh, I could be a little less selfish, or oh, I could be a little more organized, or oh, I could be more kind to myself and not necessarily use shame as motivation, maybe, or judgment as motivation. Maybe I could use wisdom as motivation. If we have some kind of insight like that, give yourself 3 months to rewire, and we do that with mindfulness. The now, heart, mind. We do it with the now, heart, mind. So if you want to drink less, when you're drinking, become mindful of your drinking. The now, heart, mind. If you want to eat less, if you want to be more disciplined, if you want to meditate more, as soon as that thought occurs, arrive at your now, heart, mind. Find that. So that's not a mind in the future. That's not a mind in the past, remembering a Dharma talk. It's a now, heart, mind. So you arrive wherever it is you're at, and then you look at that thought. Even if you have a gambling habit, and You want to change that. You don't want to stop gambling entirely. You still want to have fun, but you don't want to gamble that much. You become mindful of your gambling. And you bring your now heart mind to the decision, oh, do I go online and gamble or not? Maybe a little, but maybe not as much as before. When people asked the Buddha about desire, they asked, can desire be eliminated? His answer was, less desire. And if you look at his teaching about these 5 desires, they're always characterized as endless. So that's true. My experience has been the 5 desires, as they've been named in the tradition, are endless. My heart mind is constantly making them. They never go away. However, if I think I'm acting on too much desire or too much attachment to something, if I apply my now heart mind with no judgment and with kindness, suddenly it becomes very soft, and it's possible, oh, I can make the shift. I can just do less of this. If I say to myself, Tim, you can't do this anymore, that I do it right away. Also, if I say, Tim, you should meditate extra today, that's the day I don't meditate extra. It's just how I'm wired. So that was something set a long time ago. But it's my heart mind. I have to own it. I got to know it. And sometimes it's going to serve me. Sometimes it's going to get in the way.